The last presentation before we go on our European lunch break is from John Loehr from Lammi Biological Station from Finland, who will present the world's first science national park in the making as a living laboratory for field biology in Evo, Finland. Hi, John.
Hello. I'm going to share my screen here and we can get going.
Perfect. Yeah, we see it.
Presentation mode. Here we go. We should be all set. Thank you very much. It's great to have this opportunity. I've been following along with the meeting all this week and really impressed and happy to be one of the participants here. And so in this presentation, I'm going to talk about what we hope is an innovation in the national park concept. And so I'll introduce the area, this Evo area in southern Finland, which you can see there's an aerial photo of it right in front of you right now. And as you notice, it's very forested area, small lakes, and this is typical of the entire region, not just of the photo that you see in front of you. The area has a really interesting history, and which makes it, I think, unique in Finland. And when we had the opportunity now to put in a proposal for a national park for this area, we thought that hand in hand, it should go with science. And so when having this national park concept here, we want to make science at the forefront of it, so that when you come and experience the park, that you understand all the science that's going on there, have the opportunity to participate in research activities, and just sort of activating visitors. I think when going to visit national parks all around the world, I mean, most people will have the idea of going there to enjoy the scenery, seeing wildlife, and certainly there's a lot of science that's being done in national parks. We would just like to make science an essential part of the experience when you go there. I'm research coordinator at the University of Helsinki's Lammi Biological Station, which is about 20 kilometers away from this area. And so we are very active in the area. And so obviously joining science to national park idea was not a big jump for us. But just to give you an overview about what I'm going to talk about during the presentation, just go into the Evo region's background and history. Realize that the conservation value is high in this area. Talk about the science that's done in Evo, and then a little bit more about this idea of having a science national park. And then I'll update you on the current status of our proposal. Unfortunately, it's not yet a science national park, and so we're working on this right now, and hopefully in the next weeks and months, then we'll have some more decisions made, and we'll be able to hopefully then talk about having the first, what we think is probably the world's first science national park. So into the background and history. I'm not sure my screen sharing, we can get rid of this, then hopefully everybody can see the whole screen. This is the area that we're talking about. So here's southern Finland. And the Evo area is situated north of Helsinki, about 120 kilometers. And if we look at this general area, so this is just sort of roughly the Evo area, we're looking at a pretty much contiguously forested area, which is around 200 or over 200 square kilometers. So it's a reasonably large area where there's not a lot of habitation. So very few villages. Mostly what you would see within this area are summer cottages. But a large part of it is government land, which is currently a recreation area. And this is sort of an aerial photograph from or satellite photograph actually, of the sort of one of the heart of the recreational area as it currently is. And so this is typical for the area that we're talking about, that we would like to have recognized as a national park. This area has long been crown land before Finland became independent, and public land since then. And in this area, it was not a good agricultural area. But people who did not own land went to these crown land areas to perform the slash and burn agriculture, which mostly we associate with, say, rainforests of today. Back in the 1800s in Finland, this was a very common form of agriculture. So by first cutting and then burning, you would have ash formed on the floor of the previous forest there, and be able to start agriculture quite quickly. Obviously not very good agricultural land, but nonetheless, this was done in Evo for centuries. But it was not something that the crown was terribly supportive of. And so in 1858, Finland's first forestry school was founded. And at that time, then there was a sort of a change in how these lands were managed, and trying to get people away from using for this slash and burn agriculture and more focused on forestry. And so this was prior to Finnish independence, but nonetheless, Finland had this area and a forestry school operational all the way back into 1858. In 1953, then Lammi Biological Station was founded, and it's one of University of Helsinki's biological stations, and one of the most active, certainly. And just north of the area, as I explained earlier, is the Evo forested area, and so it's a very important research area for us. And I should also emphasize that the forestry school has been doing a great deal of research-related activities in the area, especially in recent decades. And so they are also one of the main active participants in the area. And so this is the basic background for the area. It's as wildernessy as I suppose you could possibly get in southern Finland. There are roads throughout it, mostly forestry roads. And it's an area that's well used as just for general recreation. And so there's hiking, biking, hunting, wildlife viewing, all these sorts of activities that you would associate with areas that have more wildlife and open spaces. And in addition to that, we have some very important areas for southern Finland. Within this recreational area, which is the current status of it here, this is the green area here, is the recreational area. There are protected old growth forests. The old growth areas are actually very, very rare in southern Finland. If we look down here at this graph, we see we have graphs of 140-year-old forests in this red line is southern Finland here. And so Finnish forests are very, very heavily managed. And so here you can see that there's been a little bit of an increase in recent decades of old growth, or at least 140-year-old forests in southern Finland. But basically, we're looking at about 1% of the forest in southern Finland could be classified as old growth. So this is a very rare habitat. In this area, this is the Kotinen old growth area here, which is a little bit darker green. We have 300-year-old trees. The pine trees in that area are around 300 years old. The spruce trees, many over 200 years old. We have another area down here with also very good old growth forest within it. And so these have been protected already. The interesting thing about this is that the Finnish Forestry Management Institute decided that when they had the forestry school here was founded, that they would like to keep these areas as examples of how sort of terrible forests end up looking like when they are not managed. And so this very fortuitous decision to leave some forests completely unmanaged gave us these forests, which are very high biodiversity now in southern Finland. And so we're really lucky, a little bit serendipitously lucky in this regard, that we have these old growth forests still within this area. One of the major components of old growth forests is the deadwood. And so if we just look on a Finnish scale, there's about 4,000 to 5,000 species, 10% of the total in Finland, that rely on deadwood. Of the endangered forest dwelling species in Finland, 35% are old growth species. And most of these species are fungi, lichens, and insects. When we're thinking about the biodiversity crisis, often we're thinking about what's happening elsewhere in the world, at least from a Finnish perspective. But I think what people really have to also understand is that within Finland, this is a very real occurrence as well, that the biodiversity is declining, and it's up to us to make sure that it has an opportunity to survive into the future. This is one of the nicer photos of the old growth area that we have, part of a report that was published on it. And some of examples of the species that dwell in there that rely on old growth, and especially deadwood. This is actually a mushroom species that has only ever been found once, and only in the Evo area. Unfortunately, it hasn't been found since it was first discovered. It relies on, or at least in the one time that it was found on an aspen that was lying on the forest floor. And so you can see these sorts of examples, if we perhaps never were able to find this species again, it may be that this species has already gone extinct, and we just saw a last gasp of this mushroom species that was still there, and we were still able to record it. Other species, say under deadwood, this polypore species that was one of the first places it was found was in the Evo area. And somewhat more common species, but very interesting nonetheless, that rely on old growth areas also can be found in, say, cliffs sides. But this is a moss species that has a protonemal mat which reflects light. So this mat here is acts as a reflector and reflects light onto the leaves, if you will, of the moss. And it grows in old growth forests under, so when spruce trees fall, there's very large sort of walls of roots that form quite tall. And in the base of those roots, this moss can grow where it's actually quite dark. And it's really unusual to go walking past areas where it's growing. You notice that there's something shining underneath this wall of roots, and you look in and there's the moss shining back at you. I want to point out now, again, just getting back to the science aspect, one of the world's premier ecologists, Ilkka Hanski, from the University of Helsinki, was very active at Lammi Biological Station. Also, he and his group worked in the Evo area. He was awarded a Crawford Prize, and it's basically the Nobel Prize for ecologists. Very, very influential person, and his life's work was on this idea of habitat fragmentation and how, say from a conservation perspective, how we can maximize the opportunity for species to survive. And one of the ways that we can do that, that a lot of his research then supported, was looking at, say, making sure that fragmentation of forests is at a minimum. So the larger areas that we can protect will help in the long run to preserve species. The Evo area is also still a very much intact ecosystem. We have keystone species like the beaver, and much of the research that has been done on how beavers promote biodiversity in many ways has been done in the Evo area. So if you do a search on publications, you will see Evo popping up quite a number of times. Beavers are obviously ecosystem engineers, and you could even say biodiversity engineers, in that they change the ecosystem. Here you can see just the plethora of dead wood that they produce. But not only that, say by flooding areas, it can be very important for aquatic insects. We've even just recently had studies published where we show that not only are beavers important for aquatic insects, water birds, some types of species that you would normally expect, but also for some mammal species such as the river otter and moose. We also have, say, the three-toed woodpecker, which has been studied intensively over decades in the area. And so obviously very important for species that require nest hole cavities, and an indicator species for biodiversity in general as well. So when you find that there's a three-toed woodpecker, you also know that the bird diversity in the area is reasonably high. Then from the perspective of just the EU Habitats Directive, these Annex 2 species, then just a few examples of what we have. We have in Europe, in the European Union, there's very few countries that have flying squirrel populations, but Finland is one of them. Estonia is the other. And Finland has a fairly viable population, although they have been classified as endangered. The river otter, this photo is also directly from Evo. We found, we were able to have a video the river otter breeding in the Evo area, or at least going through mating which is actually we can't find any other videos of any sort of mating behavior. And so we were very lucky that we were able to do that in Evo. Lynx population is healthy in the Evo area, and we've done also research on them through say satellite collar tracking. Brown bears are, say, more occasional visitors, but still one of the large predators in the area. And so you can see that there's an intact ecosystem with large predators still within it. Now to talk a little bit more directly about the science that's going on in Evo. We belong to this long-term ecological research network, which is worldwide, but here we see just the European stations for it. And so on the left, just a list of the type of studies that are ongoing in Evo and what the long-term ecological research site has been used for. And within it, then we have, for example, this is in the old growth protected forest area. We have this lake called Valkeakotinen, and its area of the watershed is intensely studied by actually many Finnish research institutes. It's a collaborative effort. And so we are trying to have a look at a pristine lake and see how it's functioning in order to be able to also compare it to lakes outside of this area so that we can see, say, the effect of land use in comparison to a pristine lake. This is just one of the many examples of the data series that we have available to us. And so looking at nitrogen and phosphorus trends over decades. And here we can see in a pristine environment that there's no trend over time for an increase in nitrogen and phosphorus. But this would be different if we looked at lakes that are, say, in areas where there's more influence of human activity on the landscape. And just, I think, really exciting research that was just published this year, which showing how we can, in the Evo area, also look at not only, say, just one variable over time and how it's changing, but we can look at the whole ecosystem effects. And so this is work by Celine Arzel from the University of Turku in Finland. And but a very collaborative one, because we have many different groups working there. Then we have these long-term data sets that we can start to now combine and really understand what's going on. So here we see that over time, water in many of the lakes in Evo is getting browner. And this is a common phenomenon across Finland and actually in many places around the world. So there's more organic matter that is going into the aquatic ecosystem. We'll just actually flip through this, but there are many reasons for this. One of them, possible one, is the climate change. And so what we see actually as a result of this brownification is that there are fewer aquatic invertebrates. And so we had a long-term data set of aquatic invertebrates, and we can see that at the same time as the brownification is happening, then we're finding fewer invertebrates. Now, Celine is currently working on to see how this goes further. Is it possible that there's a reduced number of breeding birds now in these lakes over decades? And so birds that use aquatic insects as one of their primary food sources. Also, we have long-term data sets on fish. And so we can start to really figure out what's happening on an ecosystem scale, which is pretty darn exciting that we can do this sort of thing. The Science National Park, then obviously now that I've sort of gone through at least a little bit of the science and you got the idea of what is going on there, it's obviously a very natural way to progress the national park idea. If this area is made into a national park, of course, science has to be a big part of it. And I'm hoping actually for the people who are listening now, my hope is by doing this presentation that maybe there's other areas around the world that could also be featured as science national parks. We'd have this new sort of way of approaching the national park concept. And so the idea being that research is coordinated and in the forefront. We would want to make in this national park the research administration centralized and easier to deal with for scientists. obviously, as you can see from the data that we have available, that if we could make this open data and make sure that many people have access to it, then it would increase certainly the impact of the research that's done in Evo. But it's a national park, and people are, and we're obviously very encouraged to come and visit. And this is where the whole educational aspect comes in, where we would have the general public, schools, education really there with the opportunity to interact with scientists in the field. And so by bringing the visitors to the park and creating ways that they can, say, be introduced to methods that are used in field biology, then this, we hope, would really promote the idea of biology to the general public and how it's done and how they can participate. Really very much a win-win situation, that we can educate the general public at the same time. They can feel that they have got a unique experience by coming to the area, and hopefully we have a concept that many people would like. The current status now, as I alluded to earlier, this is not yet a Science National Park. We're very much hopeful that it will be in the coming months. We've submitted a proposal to the Finnish Ministry of the Environment. And when I talk about we, this is the Kentälä in the Field working group, which is the University of Helsinki affiliated working group. We also try to promote with Kentälä in the Field field biology worldwide. And so the idea is similar to this Science National Park, is just getting the idea out to the general public what field biologists do, and how the general public can perhaps be a part of it. But this is very, very important to us to have these other large organizations that also signed our proposal. So the University of Helsinki, number one, was very important to the whole concept. And so we had support from the entire university. Greenpeace was a very important instigator of the whole process, which details I won't go into at the moment, but they managed to get a petition going about a year ago, promoting the Evo area as a national park. And other conservation organizations have been very helpful and lending their support. Here's the area that we proposed, is this number one area, and there's other areas around it which are privately owned land. This is the Forestry Institute's land, which they will retain in the future as well. This is where they teach students how to, forestry techniques. And there are other public land areas that we may be able to integrate into the park. Some of these other private land areas possibly could eventually at some point be integrated into the park as well. It's about a 6,000 hectare area is this number one area, plus these separated areas here. There's many interest groups that are interested in this, and if anybody has ever been involved in trying to promote a national park or the foundation of a national park, it's a tricky business. It's very much a political decision when forming a national park, and there's all sorts of interest groups that say are using the area in this case as well, such as the Scouts, hunters, outdoor enthusiasts. City of Häme, which is the nearest city close by, is also, of course, very interested in the future of the area. And this is not a new proposal in the sense that Evo has been proposed as a national park previously, but previous attempts have all failed. Perhaps most importantly, because there hasn't been a big enough public pressure, number one, and second of all, just a failure to try and make sure that everybody, as much as possible, feels included in the proposal of the park and taking people's ideas into account. At this time, at the present time, the political will seems to be very strong, and we have support from local politicians and even members of the opposition. We tried to, during this process, just really keep the Evo in the news. And so just promoting it in social media. This is the Kendala in the Field Facebook page that we promote it within. We've made it onto national news with Evo related topics. There's been numerous newspaper articles published, opinion pieces from all sorts of different interest groups have been published. And so it's very much in the news. At the moment, the proposals for national parks has been whittled down to 5. And so ours is certainly one of the top candidates in it. The Environment Minister has indicated that there's plans for 2 new national parks during the current government term. And so we're hoping for some sort of a decision that the process will continue, that we will, these 2 new national parks that the government is proposing, we're hoping that this sort of a decision will be coming in the next few weeks. These things take time though, as we've learned, and it's never straightforward. For those of you who are interested in keeping up to date with how we're doing, this is one of the ways that you can do it through our Facebook page. It's in the field biology, Twitter, Kendala Biology. And I want to thank, this is perhaps sounds like it was something that I was, very much leading, but that's not the case. This is a huge team effort, especially Pepe Forsberg, Niko Nappu, Hanna Rosti, Hanna Paulomäki, and Matti Liimatainen all together have done a lot of work for the proposal, and then all of the people who have supported and organizations that have supported us, including actually scientists who signed also our proposal. And thank you to the European Wilderness Society for giving this opportunity to present about our proposal.
Thank you very much for this presentation. We've also published your press release, the press release that was published about the establishment of this Science National Park, and we are very interested to follow how it's going. There are various questions touching on the same topic, and I also wanted to ask you whether there will be a zonation set in place where you would have a core zone, let's say, without hunting or any kind of management activities. And other people are also asking, will recreation hunting be prohibited from certain areas or completely?
These are, so the number one, the access of people to the area. This, I mean, as a national park, then it will have access to all citizens. It's not something that they will have to pay to access. There are then, say, keeping 2 trails is important within the national park, as it is in all national parks in Finland. And so there are certain restrictions on, say, movement, but nonetheless, it's typical for national parks in Finland. Hunting is one of the, say, the primary issues that needs to be dealt with. At the moment, basically, the government is investigating ways in which we can have, say, a good solution that works for everybody. As a rule, hunting is not allowed in national parks, except for that, say, moose hunting is possible where people drive moose out of a national park into an area where the moose are hunted. But in this area, this is also an important area for small game hunting in Finland. And part of the area is within the forestry school's land. And so that area will continue as it has till this point, where there's permits that you can buy there for small game hunting. The question is how to deal with the rest of the park, and that's something that we have to hand over to the government and agencies there to work out a solution. As a general rule, though, the national parks restrict hunting, as I said, and so it may be that that time will tell just what sort of solution we come to there. And we've been contacting hunting organizations and trying to discuss with them what sort of opinions they have and what sort of solutions would be possible for them. And hopefully we can all come to a good agreement, and we that the use of the area in the future is something that people are in general happy with.
Thank you. We have participants who raised his hand. Jonas Sommer, maybe the name rings a bell.
Yes.
Yeah, Jonas, you want to ask something, right?
Yeah.
Hey, John. Thank you for the interesting presentation. Yeah, I and John know each other, and I was lucky enough to spend some time in Lammi and Evo a few years ago, and I have to say it really changed my perception on forests coming from Germany. But I have a question. You said it's still a quite heavily used area compared to, for example, northeastern Finland. What do you think makes this area especially suitable for this project for the Science National Park?
Specifically, that just the amount of science that's been done in the park till now. For whatever reason, it really became an area, probably because it's close to the major population areas, and there's the institutes that are working there just next door. It's become probably the most studied area in southern Finland, at least. I would probably say all of Finland. And so it's just the sheer amount of science that's been going on there. And so when thinking about, say, a science national park, it's sort of an easy solution in this case. You don't have to bring in scientists from elsewhere to start working there. We've already got a whole bunch of groups working there, and long-term data and all sorts of things. And actually, one thing that I should have emphasized is I think we've done a pretty poor job of letting the general public know about this area and all the science that goes into it. And so this is now a way to correct that. That, hey, now we can make sure that people know what's going on there and give them the added benefit and all the schools and whatnot that can come and benefit from having an area where they can come and see how science is done. And so that's why, in my mind, it's pretty much perfect. There's certainly more wildernessy areas of Finland, especially if you go north. But here in southern Finland, this is certainly one of the best areas that you could possibly ask for. But at the same time, because forestry still happens within this recreational area, and so the degradation of the area is a constant threat. And so there are areas outside of these protected areas that where the forest is cut, and that are areas that are still quite valuable as far as biodiversity goes. And so at the same time as having the science at the forefront, and we're also having a very important conservation function.
Thank you. And we also have Simon King, who presented earlier. Simon, I think it's easier if you just unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, got it. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, John, thank you. That's I love this concept. The idea that jumped off the page at me when I looked at this was, especially because of the location and urban areas not too far away, is have you thought about well-being science? It's pretty big: planetary, eco-health, human health and well-being, environmental health and well-being. There's a lot of science that needs to be done. Is there anybody on your team interested in that type of thing?
On our team at the moment, I would say probably not. At the same time, actually, as soon as we proposed this, as soon as this got into the news, then we've been contacted by quite a few different people who are, say, outside the field of biology altogether, but are just interested in how their own field could also benefit from this. And actually, I'm sure something like this with the well-being type idea could just be the perfect type of project to match, say, the use of the public of the area with science. And I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, John, we can get in touch offline afterwards, but there are a lot of people that I know that would be very interested in looking at how to use a little lab like that, if you want to call it that. There's this idea, especially post-COVID, that we've got to find something else other than just tourism to get value out of protected areas, whatever their status of protection is, in order to secure their future. And this would be, what you've got there could be a great project in that health and wellbeing space. So yeah, I think that's lovely, a great project, great idea, and we'd support it whichever way we can.
Okay, well, definitely write me an email, and we'll try to expand on this idea.
And we will support this cooperation. So if you don't manage to get each other's contact details, then just let us know, and we will bridge the gap.
Okay.
Thank you very much, John, for this presentation.
Great. Thank you. It was a great opportunity for us, and thank you for hosting this event.
Well, thank you for accepting, and not just the presentation, but for the great work you do, basically.